good evening to everyone joining us. My name is Julie. I work for the NAIG 2020 Host Society. This was supposed to be the week that 5,000 participants came to Jipuktuk or Halifax for the 2020 North American Indigenous Games. In lieu of being able to host athletes from across Turtle Island, we have created NAIG at home. I would like to acknowledge that we are in Mi'kma'ki, the traditional and ancestral lands of the Mi'kmaq Nation. I acknowledge the treaties that have been signed in this territory and recognize that we are all treaty people. I'll quickly introduce our panelists. So we have Bryson Knockwood, who is the NAIG 2020 Team Mi'kmaq Nova Scotia lacrosse coach and a previous Team Nova Scotia lacrosse player. Tina DeRoo, who is a mental performance consultant for the Canadian Sports Centre for the Atlantic. And Carey-Leigh, who will be joining us, who is a former NCAA and Team Canada softball player and a mother of two. Finally, our moderator tonight is currently winning the 10K in our NAIG at home virtual run, Jarvis Googoo, the Associate Director of Health for the Atlantic Policy Congress. Jarvis, I'll hand it over to you to get started.
Thank you very much, Julie. Hello, everyone. So hopefully Carey will be able to join us properly soon. And the way we're going to be doing this one is I spoke with Tina a couple times this week because unlike the other night we're at, where it was just Wanique, this one we have three panelists, and I want to give everyone an opportunity to speak, to share, and to answer questions. So we'll be exploring some themes. Some of these themes that we will be exploring will be how coaches and fellow athletes can create a supportive environment, how mental health issues can impact performance, and how the perception of mental health has changed in how we coach. So the way I'm going to propose this to the panel is I'm going to ask the first question, and I'm going to basically allow anyone to jump in and allow them to speak. If the others then feel like they can add something or give a different answer, we encourage that to do so. We will try to finish this within the hour, just to be mindful of time there. And if it's like, so we're going to get started. So the first thing we want to talk about is environment with respect to the theme of coaching. And so my first question I'd like to ask is, as a coach or as a player, do you make an effort to talk to your athletes about mental health? How do you approach these topics?
So I'll just chime in here on that one. Personally, through previous mental health sort of disputes I've had within myself, talking about mental health amongst athletes, whether it be a coach or another athlete, is one of the harder things to do. But the way I found to approach it was to just break the ice, ask the question, are you okay? And like, it might not have to be as forward as that to me, because where being a coach now, you can see where some mental health things may apply to other people, so more than the others, right? So with that, approaching the whole mental health aspect to me is just from previous records. I like to, if I see it, I'll recognize it and do what I can to let the person feel comfortable enough to talk about it. And so like, I can only mainly use myself as an example for right now, especially with sports. Brendan Smithson, I'm pretty sure all you guys know him pretty well. He was my main coach for many, many years. And talking to him about mental health and those sort of issues as a player, definitely create that bond and that friendship, and that's love for sport a lot more, because when the coach is able to be there for him, right? But the way that he approached it was he was able to see like the little things, whether I would be angry with myself mid-practice and I would have to take a step away. He wouldn't mind taking a step away from the drill, having somebody else take over while he came over and chatted, just to see like, is everything all right? What's going on? Am I all cool? And there can be different approaches to that, but I found, especially with athletes that are very, very competitive, it's kind of a good way to just, take them away from that sort of show what's going on the field or in the box or in the court or whatever, and just sort of have that relaxation moment, especially when that somebody is struggling, whether it be anxiety, depression, any other form of mental health disorder or struggle. And so those are the sort of ways that I found anyway that sort of worked, right?
Right. Thank you. Tina, would you like to chime in?
Yeah, I think those are all really, really excellent points. And I think the only thing I could really add to that is sort of like you were saying, to take someone out of that sort of hyper competitive environment to have that conversation is, yeah, think about the timing of when is best to approach that conversation with someone if you notice that they're struggling. You know, even right after a game, our heart rates are still really high, emotions are still really strong. So it might be helpful to even just to give a heads up of like, hey, I'd love to talk, you know, in a couple of days. Let's take some time to cool off and let's connect, you know, tomorrow or the next day or something. And let them know also what you're seeing of like, hey, I've noticed that, you know, you're talking to your teammates a little less. I think it would be good if we connected, you know, just sort of share with them the things that you're seeing that are sort of not even necessarily red flags, but even orange flags or yellow flags of like, maybe there's something happening here, right?
Carey, can you hear us? She on?
I don't think she's back in yet.
Okay, no problem. Just saw the logo there. Thought she was on. So I'm just go to probably this other question here. Is Indigenous youth experience mental illness at an alarmingly high rate? Sport can be an important tool in supporting life with mental illness. What experiences of your own do you bring to your teams that help promote participation in sport as a resource for those struggling with mental health? I want to invite Tina to go first this time.
Sure. I think promoting sport as a resource, it's like you have to consider what the athlete is going through, like what form of mental illness are they experiencing, right? Is it anxiety? Is it depression? Is it ADHD? Is it addiction of some sort, trauma related? Like there's sort of a lot of potential things that someone could be going through or multiples of those. So, you know, the solution, like sport as a solution, should tie into what they're experiencing, right? So if it's anxiety, how do I help them use sport as a way to relax? If it's depression, how do I use sport as a way to actually energize them and help them connect, right? So it's like figuring out what is the biggest challenge with what they're going through and how can you find something in sport that can speak to that for them.
Bryson?
You pretty well hit the nail on the head right there. It's that's the exact way to do it, especially with not just Indigenous youth, but a lot of other youth in general. It does come down to what or how they feel and how that sport makes them feel, whether it be enjoyable, stress, or a coping mechanism for most. Because I know that a lot of Indigenous youth do use sport as a form of coping mechanism. And it's just unfortunate some of the resources aren't quite there for some, but that's that's kind of where that I guess you could turn it into a fun little challenge, I guess, to create that resource. But that's part of the journey and from experiences, right?
It's interesting. You just mentioned that about sport coping mechanism, because that was probably one of the big things that we talked about a few nights ago with Wanique there as well too. So.
Yeah, I was actually going to add, like, I think the social side of sport can be really, really helpful when you're going through something. So if you are experiencing one or multiple forms of mental illness or just even less good mental health at the time, right? If your sport is canceled or you can't see people in person, it's like, of the people that you can connect with in person, can you teach them about your sport? Can you do your workouts with them? Can you teach them different things and almost be a role model to others in your community, the ones who are around you, even if your teammates aren't around you, and trying to build in that social aspect as much as possible will help help persist in moments that are tough or boring, or sport has the whole gamut of emotional experiences. So it just helps in those more challenging moments, I think, to involve others within your community.
I see a Carey. I think she may have hopped on. I don't know if she can hear us yet.
She's just trying to figure out the audio.
Okay. Bottom left corner. There's a mute button. Oh, okay. All right. But if she can hear us, that's good. So when she's ready, she can jump in with an answer. So I'm gonna move on to performance. And the first one I'd like to ask is, competing is in and of itself very stressful. How can athletes learn what kind of feelings are normal pre-competition anxiety, and what are warning signs that they may be experiencing deeper, more acute stress and anxiety? And I'm going to reverse it back. I'm going to let Bryson answer this one first.
Okay, so ways that I found for other athletes to use that sort of nervousness, whether it be stress, anxiety, or other form of things and feelings that they are going into high competition. The certain things that are sort of that sort of work for some that I've noticed is recognizing the fact that they're coming up with a game plan pre-competition in their own mind. They're already sort of planning out, okay, come this time I'm going to do this, come this time I'm going to do that, but they're using their jitters as motivation to do that. When others might, when come to competition time, they'll see the face of the crowd and they'll get the nervousness and everything will just goes blank. And to be able to understand and differentiate both feelings of good and bad anxiety, that definitely does create a positive sort of impact on athletes once they're able to differentiate. And learning to use, the proper sort of like adrenaline rush and pre-competition anxiety for good. That's where we create some of the athletes that love the sport and that fall in love with it, because they get to feel, okay, this is that good feeling coming into it, and it's it's reward. It's that sort of the dopaminic reward. Releases all the endomorphs, everything like that make you feel, yeah, let's do this. We got this. And hopefully it's able to keep them motivated coming into the next competition or sport or whatever else they're involved with, right?
Thanks, Bryson. Tina?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing when it comes to like pre-competition anxiety or like nerves is all of those physical sensations are so incredibly normal. Mm-hmm. Athletes heard actually what every single other athlete was going through. I don't think they would be worried about it to the extent that most of them are. It's just that a lot of them don't talk about it, or they see someone else and they go, well, that person looks confident, therefore they must be confident. But, people can hold themselves in a particular way and still in their head be not quite feeling like they're an imposter or all sorts of things, right? So looks can trick people for sure. But just recognizing that of like, just because someone looks confident, it doesn't tell me what's going on inside for them, and whatever is going on inside for me, like, that's okay. I can still compete and do really well. I think another piece is, one thing that I've done with a lot of athletes is when they talk about like, how do I get rid of this? Mm-hmm. I just start asking them questions even around like, can you tell me about a time where you were really nervous and you still did really well? Right? It can even have one example. Then you can be like, okay, so it's possible for you to be super nervous and do well, right? They don't have to be separate. And how do we turn one experience into 2, into 3, into 4? How do we get more of that? And then also, has there been a time where you haven't been super nervous? And so you're trying to get them to have a belief that like, this is okay, this is normal, this can change, and I can perform anyways. And it's then the nerves, they're still there, they're still uncomfortable, they're still sometimes a bit alarming of like, wow, my heart is pounding a lot, or I'm sweating or whatever, right? But just slightly less alarming or less distracting maybe.
So we still have some audio issues with Carey. I don't know if she is actually typing out an answer, but if she does, what I will do is I will reread the question again, and then I will read out the answer that she has provided. I'm not going to wait till it's all typed out because it'll just be awkward. It could be awkward silence for a while here. So what I'm going to do with the two of you for now is just basically go on to the next question, still in the area of performance. And basically is, how does mental health impact performance, positive and negative? And please share your own experience on this. And I believe Bryson went first last time. So I'm going to let Tina go first on this one.
Sure. I mean, mental health, when a person's mental health is at its best, it just makes it easier to focus on the task at hand, right? It doesn't make it easy, but it's easier. It's always challenging to focus on the task at hand, but it's easier when your mental health is at its best. When your mental health is at its worst or leaning in that direction, it just makes it more challenging to focus on the task at hand, I think. So to me, yeah, it's sort of, it steals your attention, right? There's so many other things going on in your life that it's almost like you have to practice compartmentalizing of like setting that aside for now. I can come back to that later. And for right now, I'm going to focus on this, right? For the next hour, I'm going to be here with my team, or I'm going to be here doing my training. You know, that will still be there when I come back.
Yeah. Bryson?
So when it does come to performance with mental health or illness, the athlete that is carrying that sort of burden on them, positive and negative sort of effects that do happen, I find, are ones where not only does the athlete get in their own head, it is a battle amongst themselves versus themselves. And sometimes it can be an uphill battle. Sometimes it's a downhill battle. It depends on, guess how you're feeling that day or that week and that month. And personally, with my own personal experiences, I've suffered with depression for about 7 years. And about 2 years ago, I finally got off my medication and been feeling great since. But thank you. With sport alone, was able to not just get me out of my own personal rut, but it motivated me to do something that I didn't necessarily know I wanted to do. Playing lacrosse, basketball, any other sport out there, knowing that I got to just run and be with people, and that I know that I didn't have to think of less of myself or more of myself in that moment, is where luckily I was able to forget about my life, what was going on outside, or whatever else inside personally. But there are days that it does get harder, and the days that it does get hard, it's just it takes a lot of trial and error for different athletes to understand how things work for them, positively and negatively. And what I find a lot of not an issue is amongst the Indigenous youth is learning to take the step back and see things from a whole view, instead of right where they are, staying straight down a line. And not that that's a bad thing. It's just that from personal experience, I found taking that time to slow down, take a step back, has been able to not just increase my competitive level, but it's also been able to increase the motivation level as well.
Excellent.
Oh, there's Carey there.
Yeah, so we got a long answer, and I can read this out. So just to kind of rephrase back, the question initially was, when it comes to pre-competition anxiety and nerves, how do you cope with those feelings and manage those emotions? So Carey's response, I'm going to read out loud here. When it comes to pre-competition anxiety and nerves, I coped with those feelings and managed my emotions by having a consistent routine beforehand, meaning I've always sprayed and fixed my hair well before leaving the field to warm-ups, made sure I had everything cleaned and my equipment bag so I wasn't rushing before it was time to go. It was important for me to listen to music on the ride to the field and really focus on having a good warm-up. I managed by controlling what I could control, We always knew if we were playing in the game beforehand. So then if I was playing, I would set goals for myself to keep me in check, to keep me in the best possible mindset to do what I need to do, so that when the time came for me to perform, I'm able to, because I mentally prepared myself starting that morning of. So thank you very much for that one there, Carey, and we appreciate you typing that out as well, and being able to read it for all of us. So the third question I want to jump onto, and Carey, I also hope you can hear this one, is still on the topic of performance. The question is, you hear in sports movies lines such as, keep your head up when you're losing. These kinds of cues to keep putting the effort in, even when you are down, are important for the teams. What kind of tools do you use to keep yourself motivated even when things aren't going your way? And just like before, I would like to start with Bryson first.
So personal things that I use are the game's not over till it's over. You know, until that final buzzer hits zero, that's, you know, as a coach and as an athlete, you don't want to see anybody cutting it short. And where mental health and, you know, motivation does come into that, especially at the very end, you know, it's easy to get into your own head and into and share off that sort of vibe where, oh, we're already down, you know, what more could we ask for? And I find it takes a lot of discipline to be able to say, you know, no, the game is not over, or the event is not over. You know, I still have so many more kilometers to run, or still have that much more to do, or still one more period left. You know, even if you are down or you're not feeling the greatest at the moment, it's definitely not one of the reasons to quit. But yeah, when you hear those sort of lines in movies and stuff like that, as an athlete that does watch a lot of movies, it's you know, it's the little cues that you kind of remind yourself. It is the sort of cliches, you know, you are down and you catch yourself hanging your head. I watched a really beautiful clip one time of a basketball player. He missed 2 free throws, and that put them down. That kept them down by 3. And his teammate, he noticed he was hanging his head, walking back. You know, he had that, you know, sort of sway in his head. His teammate had come up and physically grabbed his chin, and he lifted his head up. And that sort of posture, you noticed instantly how fast it changed. He's like, yeah, I'm down. My teammates got me. Okay, awesome. We're still in this game. We still got this. And when it does come to mental health, it does affect you to a pretty deep extent. And you know, certain tools such as like just reminding of yourself of those little cues, and reminding yourself of you know, it ain't over till it's over.
Thank you, Bryson. Tina?
That's one of my favorite ones. I think the time I use that one the most is actually when I'm playing cards with my family and I'm losing, but you know. But yeah, game's not over till it's over. I think some other ones, especially if there's like a really big gap in a score or in a race where, like, you know, maybe there is sort of a physiological, like in a running race, let's say there might be an actual sort of limitation. It's like, well, they're like, you know, 400 meters ahead of me, and like, you know, there's only how much time left or whatever. It's rather than like, okay, well, maybe I don't feel like I should push myself, but what are the other benefits of me pushing myself right now? Right? Like, how will me pushing right to the end help me in the next race when there's a smaller gap, right? Or in the next game when that gap is smaller and it's like, ooh, who's going to take it? Like, I need to practice persisting when there is that sort of question up in the air, who's going to take it. Just, I think coaches and athletes can help each other by, you know, sharing those underdog stories. So if you're coming into a game where you feel like you are the underdog, it's like, can you think of either someone in your community or, you know, a really famous example of someone who just like fought and clawed their way to a victory, and be like, sort of the the thought of like, well, if they can do it, we can do it, or how is our team similar to that team, or how is this person similar to that person? So as a coach, you know, if you have a specific person, just be like, I see that fighting spirit in you, just like in that person. So like, I know you can do this, and give them a really specific reason why you think they can persist right to the end.
Thank you. I don't know if Carey's still typing. So what I'm going to propose to do is I will go to the next question. But if and when we get an answer back from Carey, I will, perfect timing. Hope I didn't force you to just start quick. So stay with the question. I can read this out. It's from Carey. If I could tell that my emotions were getting the best of me, or if things weren't going my way, such as if I had a strikeout, popped the ball up, didn't score the run in scoring position, or didn't field a ground ball cleanly, I always had the mentality of, okay, next one is mine. Meaning, the next bat is mine, the next ground ball is mine. I always strived for not letting the pitching strike me or get me out twice in a row, or not having 2 defensive mistakes in a row, because at a high level of sport, there's no time to dwell on the past, because that's what it is. It's in the past, and it's time to focus on the next play. I have a saying tattooed on my wrist in the Kanyanga language, Iguahi Enisekoki, which means don't give up. And I got on my wrist for a reason, as it serves as a reminder if I happen to have my head down for a split second to collect myself. Thank you so much for that one, Carey. And don't know if I did the language justice. I hope I did. But this very echoes quite a bit what Bryson was saying earlier with the documentary with the sport, where someone had their head down and someone physically just lifted it back up, and this one being a tattoo. So thank you so much for that one, Carey. And the next question, it goes into the area and field of captains and coaches. So I'm going to go with this one here. In recent years, mental health has been elevated to the athletic community for leaders on teams, coaches, captains, etc. What advice would you give on making mental fitness as important as crucial fitness? And so with this one, I'm going to start with Tina this time.
Sure. Yeah, I think if a coach isn't in the habit of integrating, mental skills into their practice, it can feel really intimidating of like, where do I even start? How does this fit in? I can barely, start practice on time and get everything in that I want to. And I think it's like, pick one thing and just like add it, just sprinkle it into the practice that you already have. So it could be like setting, like Carey mentioned earlier, like setting a small goal, right? Just like between now and Christmas, like we are going to set small goals before practice. And like, that's the first thing that we're going to do. And then between like Christmas and the springtime, we're going to work on relaxing after practice, or like as we do our stretches, we're going to focus on relaxation. Just finding small little things and debriefing in between drills. I think that's something like we're already taking time to sort of pause and explain the next piece, but if you can add in like one little like metaphor or something for them to focus on, those little things will go a really long way into just integrating it all together. Like it's not different. It's just like, yeah, I think, picking a few metaphors that really, really work for your sport, and thinking in advance of like, where could I sort of sprinkle these into the practice?
Thank you for that. Bryson?
So just from advice that I've gotten in myself, communication is key for everybody, whether it be the athletes and coaches of those of the leader role or anything like that. Being able to understand that there is no shame in communicating how you feel. It can go a long way in sport and in life. If you're between drills, the same way that Tina mentioned, it's always good to add those little bit of metaphors, all sort of little descriptive sort of things for them to be able to understand that that communicating is not one of the shameful things. If you messed up, it's okay to say I messed up, but you have to be able to fix it. And it's as an athlete that can set deep, and it definitely takes a lot for an athlete to be able to bring themselves out of it. But being able to talk to not just whether it be the captain of the team, another player, the coach, or anything like that. To me, communication is key all the way across the board for practicing good mental health.
And I'm very pleased to share that we got an answer from Carey for that question. So I'm just going to read this out loud here. I always think back to a quote from that famous movie, A League of Their Own, when the coach says, "Of course it's hard. If it wasn't hard, then everyone would be doing it. The hard is what makes it great." And that resonates with me huge, because in huge competitions and high levels of sport, things aren't always going to go your way. And that's how athletes handle themselves in those situations, is how you can distinguish the good athletes from the great ones who have heart. So thank you for that one, Carey. The next question I'll just jump into, the kind of a bit of a mishmash. So how have you, during our times, COVID, obviously, how have you used this time to stay fit and healthy, basically? So I believe we started with Tina, the last one. So Bryson will go first.
So ways that I kept fit and stayed healthy is understanding that I know that I can't go anywhere, I can't do anything, I can't go to the gym or anything like that I was so used to. But as an athlete that grew up, being Indigenous and stuff, you aren't always going to have access to all the fancy, bells and whistles that you want to your workout and everything like that. And so a lot of it being home does have to, you do have to take into accountability for it. And, being both mental and physical health, you have to be able to, well, not just yourself, but athletes alone have to be able to understand that it's a battle between both things, whether it be your own mental health and physical health. And being stuck at home all the time does take a large, impact on a lot of youth. That's a lot of developmental years that they're missing out on sport, community events, social events. And when it comes to especially COVID, finding that self-motivation is difficult, but the ways that I know that others in the Indigenous community and amongst myself are, again, communicating. I like to, I don't know why I keep looping back to communicating, but being able to express the way that you feel and your emotions and how you feel about it are big stepping stones for those that need it. And especially with the times through COVID, being able to understand that, okay, not all my cards are in my favor, but that doesn't mean that I can't still do this or I can't still do that. Myself personally, started doing, sprint triathlons last year. This year through COVID, I've probably shaved off maybe 6 minutes total off every single time. And just cause, it's that motivation, it's, I have all this time and why not put it to something good? And even though COVID is rough, on those physically and mentally, it's a little battles and reminding yourself that at the end of the day, you'll come out of this as a stronger person, being physically or mentally stronger.
Bryson. Tina?
Yeah, well said. I think for me, always the most challenging thing about being active on my own is just that I don't push myself as hard when I'm by myself. So I know that I'm always going to push myself harder when someone else is around, when someone else is doing it with me, when someone else knows that I'm doing it. So I think it's a piece of it is like building some self-awareness about like what allows you to stay accountable. What, is it people? Is it a goal? Is it an outcome? Like what's the thing for you that's going to keep you coming back? And like, for me, it's definitely people. And so like, it can be challenging, but just to ask someone for help and be like, hey, can you like once a week, just ask me how my run went? Or like, can you do yoga with me once a week, like even on Zoom, or, you know, just finding a solution and like sort of along the lines of what Bryson was saying of like communicating and asking for help, which is a really challenging thing to do for a lot of people. But it's such a valuable skill to practice, right? And I think right now it's, in some ways it's easier because at least initially it felt like we were all going through the same thing. I think it's clear that we're not going through the exact same thing, but, you know, globally, you know, there are a lot of similarities, I guess. But yeah, like getting to know yourself, what drives you, and just do your best to integrate that into your life to help keep you accountable to it and push yourself.
Before I read this question, I want to just kind of echo what you said there. I think I saw a quote about online a few weeks ago. It was to the effect of saying, we're not in the same boat, because, you know, everyone has different access to resources and networks, but we are still in the same storm. So I want to read out Carey's question here. So thank you, Carey, for typing this. And she responds, the advice I would give to those in leadership roles as coaches and as athletes to help integrate mental skills into training is by starting out small, such as set small goals for anything and everything so that you get into the habit of doing it, such as before practice or before a game, for a strength and conditioning session, etc. Athletes can set small goals daily. If it's okay, even if it's, quote, okay, today I'm going to run my sprints 5 seconds fast today, or okay, I'm going to focus on driving the ball, or okay, today I'm going to focus on staying in the game the whole time and not to be distracted. I would also suggest to teach accountability, meaning team up with another coach or teammate and say your goal out loud to them so that they can keep you accountable, and vice versa. I also want to share, just not going to get off topic too much, but I want to share something personal as well too. Juaniqua mentioned this a few nights ago, that she created the SOAR Movement Spirit running Facebook group, where we just kind of posted a daily run update. I'm a member of that group, very thankful for that. I'm also a member of 2 other groups. One's with a fellow instructor friend of mine, Good Life. It's basically be quarantine and fitness. It's a fun group. And the other one is called Going to Social Distance. It's a Canadian-wide running group where people just share their time, share selfies, share videos. And it's kind of a fun way we all kind of kept each other in check and kind of staying focused there. So definitely a lot of good power and positivity with social media there. The other question, it kind of alludes to what we have just been speaking about, but gets a bit more specific, is, as we know, with COVID, it's not just NAIG, it's sports, a lot of things have been canceled, postponed, rescheduled, etc. So as a coach, in talking to your athletes, with everything being canceled and you haven't been getting together, how do you keep them motivated in all of this? Like I said, it alludes to the last question, but it probably could be more specific. So I believe I'm going to ask Tina to go first this time, I think, and then we'll go to Bryson.
Sure. Like motivation is all about why. Why are you doing what you're doing? And I think it's, you know, engaging with your athletes about why they did what they were doing, and that why will change, and it can change, and they can pick one, right? That it's not like one thing for the rest of your life. Like, I think for a lot of athletes, it might start out because it's fun, or because a parent did it, or someone that they look up to did it. And then sometimes it shifts into feeling more like work, or they're doing it because their friends are still in it, or, you know, like it's going to change over the course of their whole sporting career. And so just helping them, just starting to ask the questions of like, hey, let's think about like, why were we doing this before? You know, why why are we going to do this moving forward? Like, what's in it for you? What's in it for your community? How does this connect to the bigger goals in your life? Like, even if you don't want to do this at a pro level, right? You think about, your future and what skills do you need for some of those future goals? Like, and how can you work on those skills through your sport right now? Right. So it's just like the more connections you can build between the sport and things that are important to the athletes, and ask them questions about why they're doing things. I think that just helps them understand their own sources of motivation. Yeah.
All right, thank you, Tina. Bryson.
Through the COVID, I have tried to make it a point to reach out to all of our athletes, to not just check up on them and talk to them a little. And one told me that he didn't know if he was as motivated as he was, because this would have been probably his his favorite year, his peak year, and it would have wrapped everything up for his career lovely for him, he said. And he doesn't know if he'll love it anymore. And I tried to make it a point to understand that although things did get postponed, that's a whole extra year to get better. That's a whole extra year as a team. We can work as a unit. You can work on yourself. The time between now and 6 months from now is astronomical. So imagine what it'd be like if within a year time. And we are put in certain circumstances that are definitely rough, and they're definitely hard with finding the motivation, especially when, okay, these games, I was waiting 3 years for them already. Oh, I have to wait another year. For those, it is, it can lose motivation, but I've tried to make it a point to contact all of our athletes that I'm involved with and let them know that that's a whole extra year to get better.
Before I get into Carey's question, she's answered. I did want to add to that on a personal level too. It's like all my races were canceled. I was signed up for a few marathons this year, and because obviously I wanted to qualify for Boston this year, but it's not going to happen. But at the same time, like you were saying, I strongly agree with that one. And your point resonates. Is another year to get better, just a year of added more training practices into what you're doing. So thank you for that. Carey did respond to that question, so I'm going to read out loud for us. During COVID, I have used this time to learn to grow a garden to feed my family. I have taken the family on many walks through trails. My oldest daughter likes to ride her bike around the track as I run the track with my littlest in the jog and stroller. Mentally, it has been tough as this is something that was completely new and thrown at us so quickly. I reminded myself and my family that we just need to take it day by day. Let's just focus on what we can control today and how we can make the most of it. Together, 4 to 5 times a week, I attended my fitness class that is run outside of the New Credit Reservation, just next to Six Nations, and with my own equipment. So it is awesome to get out and sweat out, because as a former athlete, I live for that type of training and fitness that they do. As a stress reliever, I always have my hidden net set up so that when I can, I just go out and hit some balls, and my oldest daughter often follows and joins, and that makes me happy as I can pass down to her what I have learned. So thank you very much for that, Carey. And like I said, I think definitely with COVID there, and as I was mentioning, with the groups I was a part of, as we know, year round in the old world, we all know that, exercise, physical and mental health, it's so important. And I think even with COVID, I think we just come to realize even more how critical it truly is investing in our physical and mental health. And when, things get better, we go right back to the part of our social health as well. In the meantime, we have, great technology to help us out with that. So basically my last question is basically a free-for-all for anyone. Just basically any closing thoughts, words of wisdom, or shared advice you would like to just share out for our viewers and our listeners right now. So I'm going to invite Bryson to start this one off. And I meant to remember who won. I basically go with who won last. You go first this time. So Bryson will start, and then it will be up Tina, and hopefully we'll get some closing words as well from Carey. So go ahead, Bryson.
So some words of wisdom that I have for not just for all coaches, athletes, and leaders that might not just be athletes are it is going to be a battle, and within the battle you have to learn how to be strong, whether it be mentally, physically, emotionally, or all sorts of things. There are different ways that do define what is strong, and there are different ways to define what may be considered a quote warrior. To me, a warrior is someone who doesn't back down in the face of hardship, and whether or not that be your own personal struggles, physical, like within your sport or anything like that, it's never a reason to give up. That's pretty well all I got.
Thank you, Bryson. Tina.
Yeah, wow, well said. Yeah, I think any advice to me, something that is just the most helpful whether I'm going through something challenging or something that's really exciting, is just remembering that nothing's permanent. It helps keep me anchored in the good times while they're there. And then also when things are not as fun, then it's like, okay, this isn't going to last forever. So what can I do to shrink up the amount of time that it does last, or to lessen the intensity of this experience, or just make it happen less often, right? It's just like, if I imagine my life as a squiggly line of going up and down, and imagine those waves, it's like, how do I make those waves smaller, or shorter, or just less frequent bumps?
Yeah.
I always come back to that. And I think that imagery came from my mom, and talking about the waves of grief and emotions and all sorts of things that we'll go through over a lifetime, and partly like riding the waves, but then trying to shrink them down as best you can.
Yeah. So I am presuming Carey's typing or writing up something. So till that pops up there, I think a fellow I'm also a lawyer. I don't practice law anymore, but a fellow Mi'kmaq lawyer basically just said, as what basically you two what said too, was the whole, this too shall pass. And one interesting bit of history that was shared with me, and like we all know about this, but it was you gotta remember, like, with here in Mi'kmaq and other places throughout Turtle Island, we've had just outbreaks and times of disease, viruses that killed off a lot of our peoples here, and of course there's a lot of historic racism within that there. And I'm thinking now of, like, we're in 2020 and we have this here now, but the fortunate thing is we have access to a lot of information, medicines and doctors, and being precautious till this thing goes away, and or we actually get a good vaccine to address it. So the words patience is a virtue have definitely never been more truthful. Have never been more true, especially for these times.
Yeah.
So I am not sure if Julie can hear me, or I don't know if Carey is writing something.
I also don't know if she's writing something, but I just wanted to thank all three of you for being here. That was a really great conversation, and great adapting to the situation with Carey-Leigh. I think it just shows how great everyone is at adapting to crazy situations now.
I'm happy she was able to share her words as well.
Yeah, really great that we could hear from her as well.
I feel like Carey deserves a book deal for how well she writes.
Yeah, right.
Thank you, Carey.
For anyone who's tuning in and wants to check out the NAIG at Home activities, our Maui Yomi and our virtual marketplace are live into next week, and all of our competitions are finishing up tonight, so make sure you get your submissions in. Otherwise, I think we'll call it. We haven't heard from Carey-Leigh. It's been 5 minutes, so I think we'll say thank you very much, and hopefully we'll get to meet in person soon.
Yes. We'll all go sit win. The Maltas.
Namoltis, thank you guys.
Well,
See you, everyone. Thanks for tuning in.